So how in the hell have I never seen Visiting Hours? I'm almost mad about it. Anyway, let's review Visiting Hours. Visiting Hours stars Michael Ironside, Lee Grant, and is directed by Jean-Claude Lourdes. What's up, guys? This is definitely an unplanned review. Just last night I had some free time on my hand and I thought, you know what? I love hospital slashers, so why not throw in Visiting Hours? And first off, big shout out to Jason Nike, who sent me this double feature Blu-ray from Shout Factory with Bad Dreams. Have not watched Bad Dreams yet, but I'm gonna put a card here to Jason's channel. And he has stated that this is like in his top 10 favorite horror films. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jason. But after watching this, not only do I completely understand why it would be in your top 10 horror films, but I'm also flabbergasted that this movie wasn't a big hit and isn't more popular than it is. Shocking, actually, to me. So, looking forward to getting into this review. So anyway, quick plot synopsis. Michael Ironside plays this serial killer named Colt, and throughout the movie, he is stalking Deborah, played by Lee Grant. You see at the beginning of the movie, Deborah is this famous news anchor, and she's doing this like nightly report, and she says something that really gets under Colt's skin. And Colt, he really is a woman hater, and we're going to get into all that in the psychology of Colt in the review. But she strikes a chord with him, and so throughout the rest of the movie, he is just after her, and he hates her with a purple passion. Now, first off, can I talk about critics back in the early 80s? This movie came out in '82. And I'm just kind of shocked and perplexed that critics back then, they just didn't seem to have their finger on the pulse of horror. And I'm not talking about as in terms of like violence, even though that applies too, but really just like thematically. Because this, to me, clearly is a feminist type of film. You have so many strong women archetypes in this movie. Obviously, the first one is Deborah, played by Lee Grant, but also these two characters, Sheila and Lisa, which I will get into those two characters as well. But when this movie came out, it was just completely blasted by critics, specifically Siskel and Ebert, of course, and they called this a misogynistic film, when it's exactly the opposite of that. And to me, it's like almost glaring that it's that. But not only that, I was really shouting at the mountaintop about how great this movie was, just from a production standpoint. I've reviewed a lot of lower budget grindhouse types of films, and you know, the other end of that, the other end of the spectrum, is this A-level type of production, you know, like The First Prom Night. This fits firmly into that. You know, you have a top writer of the day, Brian Taggart, and by the way, I watched this interview on the Blu-ray with Brian Taggart, not just talking about this film, but his career in Hollywood, which I believe he still works today. But even he himself saw this as a feminist type of film, and he was completely blown away by the reaction of the critics. But this is a type of writer that approaches material from a very sophisticated standpoint. He didn't want to just do your basic, you know, slasher, Friday the 13th type of movie where, you know, you got a quick body count and every person that's killed, they're dead up until the final girl. No, this is a very layered plot in so many different ways. Like, I could literally talk for an hour about this movie, honestly, if I wanted to, just because of how much care and detail Brian Taggart put into all the characters. First off, Colt. Michael Ironside, oh my God, what a revelation this guy was. Like, I did like a top 10 most underrated killers list. He definitely would have been probably in the top 5 of that list for his performance in this movie. And I believe they had like a list of actors that they were wanting to audition for the role. But Michael Ironside came in for the audition as the character of Colt and said, you don't need anybody else. I'm your guy. I'm here. And by the end of this, this audition, you're going to give me the role. And that's exactly what happened. And the proof is right there in the pudding. He gives a very like layered performance, and it only helps that Brian Taggart wrote a small backstory for Colt about a child who was abused. You know, he gives a reason why he ended up becoming the way he did. And I've talked in the past about how much you should give as far as a backstory for a killer, and it also matters, I guess, who the killer is. You know, like Michael Myers, you kind of want him to be that blank slate, because at the age he was 6 years old and he killed his sister and he had a normal childhood. That alone is interesting. But it's okay if you have a guy that is a serial killer and to learn a little bit about what happened in the past to make him that way, because it kind of fits in with the relationship he has with Deborah. And throughout the movie, you're going to see, he just treats women like trash. He disposes of them. And this isn't one of those slasher movies where every person that's attacked is killed immediately. No, you literally have two other people besides Deborah at the end of the movie that are attacked and live. And that was a choice made by Brian Taggart. You have this character, Lisa, played by Lenore Zahn. And by the way, I have never seen an actress look so much like Maika Monroe, even though Maika Monroe looks like her because she's older. But I'm serious. She looks spitting image of Maika Monroe. She was also in Happy Birthday to Me. But she gives a great performance in this. And at first, immediately, you think of her as slasher fodder. You think, oh, just by the way she looks, she looks wild. She's going to be killed within the next 10 minutes, and then we're going to move forward. But no, we spend a good portion of time with her. And she goes to Colt's apartment and Colt attacks her. And it's a very violent scene. But surprisingly, he lets her go. She lives. And I think that's a smart choice too, because there are cases of serial killers in the past that have let victims go. 9 times out of 10, they're going to kill them. But I think there was something in that character that was like a spark for Colt. And so he let her go. And then later, there's this character, Sheila, who is one of the nurses in the movie, who has a very prominent role throughout, By the time she's attacked, you're with this character. You know that she's a mother. You see her taking care of her child. You know that she has a babysitter. And, we've spent a good amount of time with this character, so she's pretty much set up to where she could easily be a final girl. And she sort of is kind of a final girl. It's like you have a couple of different final girls with her and Deborah. But she gives a great performance. Really, all the actors in this movie give amazing performances. And she's attacked near the end of the movie. And of course, she lives. And as I'm watching this movie, I'm like, I've never seen anything like this before. The acting is pretty much top notch. The story is so refreshing. And this movie is just highly rewatchable, highly entertaining. And it's very, very intense. There's not a dull moment in this. The story takes a lot of twists and turns. And you never know really where it's going to go. And also, this is a hospital slasher. I haven't even brought that up yet. I freaking love hospital slashers, but I'll say this right now. Of the hospital slashers, I think this is the best. Yes, this is better than Halloween 2. Because it feels like a full meal, Our main character, Deborah, she isn't comatose throughout most of the movie. This movie doesn't depend on the hospital setting because actually Colt goes to and from the hospital like multiple times throughout the movie. So we're in a bunch of different locations. There's a good portion where we're with the character Lisa. There's a good portion where we're with the character Sheila, going to her apartment. A lot of great stuff. There were moments in this movie that kind of reminded me of 10 to Midnight a little bit. Oh, and did I mention that William Shatner's in this? He's got a small part, but William Shatner, he is the co-worker, I think maybe boyfriend of Deborah. But, he's William Shatner. He still does a great job in the movie, but I don't think his role is nearly as prominent as the rest of the cast. Now, the final act in this movie is glorious because we have this great chase with Deborah. If you look at the beginning of the movie, she is attacked by Colt. It's a very violent attack. Like, Colt just springs out of nowhere quite a few times in this movie, and it does scare the shit out of you. But in the last act, Deborah, she stands up and she takes him on. And Lee Grant's performance in this last scene, I think, was amazing because she stabs Colt in the stomach. But as she stabs him, she just looks at him dead in the eyes. Like, I won, I have you, and you are beaten. And, there's a nice pause in the scene, and it just works really well. I think they didn't really need to add that extra jump at the end of it, which is something that's constantly made fun of. It's a horror trope at this point. Wasn't really needed because the movie itself is just so satisfying. Also, I can't not mention the direction by John Claude Lord. I can tell when the camera work is at kind of like a journeyman level. But John Claude Lord, I mean, I don't want to say master at his craft, but really the camera angles in this, you know, just the creativity throughout. The camera like constantly moves in a lot of the scenes. There's some scenes where it feels like the point of view of the killer. You got this one scene with the character Sheila, and the camera's like behind this lattice and, you know, looking through at her. Just really creepy stuff. And, you know, just the camera work in this movie, it really keeps you on your toes. You know, it's never stale. It's constantly interesting, and it just keeps you invested. You know, I think, honestly, this movie, for a slasher filmmaker, you know, that's wanting to learn the craft, watch Visiting Hours, because really there's so many different little nuggets that you could use to learn about filmmaking in watching this movie. Just the way the camera moves. And, you know, everything seems really intentional at a very, very professional level. And again, you got Michael Ironside turning in, I think, one of the most underrated performances I've seen out of like a serial killer type of movie. Just a killer in general. Like, wow. Can you imagine like if Michael Ironside would have been in 10 to Midnight? Because the guy that played the killer in 10 to Midnight, although very interesting and psychotic, he definitely wasn't on the level as Michael Ironside in terms of acting. But wow, just there's a couple scenes in this movie where he really is creepy as hell. You know, this one where he's like sitting on the floor in this boiler room and he's having like a flashback and he's like melting almost. There's a scene in the last act where he slams his forearm on the refrigerator on this beer bottle. You know, just little details, little character moments throughout that are just so memorable. So again, I just do not get why this movie wasn't huge, because it's at the level of the greats, I think, honestly. I'm giving this movie a Trapped on an Island, and I did not expect that whatsoever. Like, this would probably be in my like top 10 favorite slashers of all time. How exciting. Is it me? Like, have all of you guys seen Visiting Hours and I'm just like really late to the party? I don't know. Because I don't hear people talking about Visiting Hours that much, which is strange. Because this is a very effective, amazing slasher movie. So, anyway, guys, yeah, check this movie out if you haven't seen it. Can't recommend it enough. Also, be sure to come over to Killer Flicks, where we talk horror all day and every day. And on Fridays, we do Free For Fridays. Thank you so much, Jason Nike, for sending that to me and recommending it. Support me on Patreon. Buy me a coffee. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and Drumdum out.